Hey guys, I figured it was maybe finally time to tell this story. Um, and before I start, just, I'm probably going to have a lot of background noise. I have birds and dog. And anyway, so if it gets noisy, just bear with me. But yeah, I finally thought it was time to tell the story. I've talked about, a lot of you guys know that Mike passed away. And but I never really got into what happened. And I feel like, I'm kind of like ready to tell that story. So oh wow, where do I start with this? So first of all, um, the title of the video, My Twin Flame Died. Okay. So I don't love labels, but if I had to put a label on a relationship, it would be it would be the we really fit that twin flame dynamic. There is something to this. I don't know how it works, but yeah, there's definitely something to it. And I really got confirmation of that when he died. Not that I doubted that connection, but boy, did it sure gave me the confirmation um that I needed when he passed away. So, okay, without further ado, what happened? All right. So, gosh, where do I start here? Okay, so Mike, first of all, Mike he was 57 when he died, and he had always been super healthy. You know, pretty in good shape, not overweight, no significant health problems. In fact, I can't think of one time outside of his GOT physicals that he went to a doctor during the 2 decades we were together. He was you know that healthy. And so what happened was really kind of shocking. What happened? Well, so what happened? Well, okay, let me set this up. So Mike and I, gosh, yeah, we were going through a really rough patch. Well, I mean, our whole relationship has been a rough patch, but um, so like 2 years ago, I'm just like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. My soul was just dying, literally dying. I'm like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. Like to me at the time, it seemed like he didn't want to wake up. He was like really entrenched in the matrix, and I was going a different way. I was like leveling up big time. My spiritual gifts came online in 2017, and that's when I found out like I was a full-blown psychic, and I'm doing that kind of work. And quite frankly, me doing that kind of work freaked him out. It really freaked him out, you know and he knew it was real when like we had like my son's childhood friend um brought her fiance over for dinner. And I had never met this young man, but it was so funny because like about like an hour before they got here, his grandma starts coming through, and I'm like, oh my god. So they got there, and I said, are you open to something? And I kind of explained it, and he said, absolutely. And I said, yeah, your grandma's definitely coming through. I said, was her name Joyce? And he said, well, it was Joy. And I'm like, okay. And I just proceeded to like I said, okay, so like I even like got so specific. I'm like, "Are you guys selling a piano of hers?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I mean, I just went on like on and on with this kind of evidentiary mediumship stuff. And Mike had never seen me do mediumship before. And I think it really freaked him out. Like it really I don't know, it just like challenged his whole worldview, right? In some way. Anyway, um so yeah, I mean, I was in on that path, and Mike was doing, oh gosh, he was like just really entrenched in matrix stuff, okay? um and I couldn't reach him. I just felt like I felt like we had reached a point where um I really needed to, yeah, God, yeah, I really needed to just um I needed to move out, you know. I God, I was angry with him. I was really angry with him because, like we would be really mean to each other. We really would, and I was just harboring a lot of resentment, and I was hurt and I was angry, and I thought, you know what? I have to move out. And so I started making plans, and in in September of 2024, I took our son and I moved out. And it was really weird because when I left, I told, I was like, I don't ever want to talk to you again. I don't want to see you again. Of course, I didn't mean it. And so it wasn't too long before, like, I can't remember who reached out to who. But anyway, so we were getting to a point where we're like, we could, we could speak to each other without anger and resentment. And I started having him over on Sunday nights for dinner, and then we did the holidays together, and yeah, so we were doing Sunday night dinners as a family, and so I had him over for the holidays, and oh God, um, he drove long haul, and he didn't get home till like I think it was like the 23rd. Um, and he came over Christmas Eve, and we had Christmas Eve dinner, and we were watching movies, and he just started to feel crappy, and he goes, I don't feel well. He's like, I just don't feel well. And I thought, well, maybe he's just coming down with a bug, because Derek and I had we'd had like a little bit of a thing going on, and I thought, well, that's probably all it is, right? And so he stayed overnight, and then we had Christmas, and um he had like a storage shed that with all of his stuff that he was going to move into our old house, right? Because when Derek and I moved out, he had room to move this stuff, and he's like, well, I don't need a storage shed. And he started well, he moved that storage shed with a bunch of heavy crap, and I mean, it was a lot, all by himself, and he got a whole lot sicker. And a couple of days later, he called me and he said, I just don't feel well. He said, my feet are swelling. And I knew that wasn't good. I said, you have got to go to urgent care. And so he went to an urgent care, and they looked at him, they checked him out, and they said, you need to go to the ER. And he called me and told me what happened. And I said, you need to go to the ER. And he did. And a few hours later, he calls me and I said, so what are they saying? And he goes, well, apparently I have congestive heart failure. And I literally freaked out. I freaked out. And I'm like, oh my God, right? Literally freaked out. And they admitted him to the hospital. And, they started him on medication and, basically told him that they're like, you are not going to be able to go back to work, because he was adamant he was going back to work. And the doctors are like, no, you're not going back to work. Not only did he have congestive heart failure, but come to find out he had type 2 diabetes. So don't know where that came from. Like I said, healthy, fit, no pre-existing conditions that we know of, and here we are with these wild conditions that he's all of a sudden got. And okay, so he stayed in the hospital for almost a week, and then he came home with me and stayed for a few days, and then he's like, yeah, I feel better, I think I'm gonna head back home. And I'm like, okay, well, all right. And I could just tell he was struggling. And that was the first week of, well, no, it's actually the second week of January of 2025, So the new year just passed and he's going through this. And I was really worried. I knew this was bad. I mean, I know congestive heart failure is not good, right? But we had a neighbor who had it and he came through okay. He's still alive and he's managing it. But I got out my cards and I'm just like, I want to know what the prognosis of this situation is. And I pulled 2 cards, and the first one was the 2 of Cups reversed, and then the second one was the 10 of Cups reversed, which told me that, our journey as a couple, this is where it ends, and our journey as a family, this is where it ends. So I knew he was going to die. I knew he was going to die. I didn't want to believe it. I had, I just kept hoping. I'm like, God, please let me be wrong. But I wasn't wrong. I started taking him to his appointments, and he was still coming over, on the weekends, and we would. I'm so glad we had this time, because we would sit there and we would watch like these crazy, silly old horror movies. Like we would just sit there on the couch and watch silly movies and have snacks and laugh. And I'm so glad we had that time. So fast forward to March, he was still having a lot of tests run. He was going to the cardiologist, and they wanted to do one of the nuclear stress test, I believe it was. And the one where I think you have to like drink some solution. Anyway, so he was scheduled for that on March 12th, and which was a Tuesday. So he had left, he had been over that Sunday, and I said, well, I'll see you, because I was going to take him to the appointment. I said, well, all right, I'll see you Tuesday morning. And I didn't check on him Monday. I didn't call him. Mondays are my errand days, so I just didn't. And so Tuesday morning rolls around, and I go to the house, and I usually he's like, when I pick him up for an appointment, he's usually outside in the driveway with his paperwork and everything ready, and he wasn't outside. So I went to the door and I banged on the door. No answer. And I banged on the door again. No answer. I tried to call him on the phone. No answer. I still had my house keys. So I let myself in, and he was laying on the floor. He'd collapsed. And oh, it was awful. I mean, he was still alive, but, he was making noise. He couldn't respond to me. I immediately called the ambulance, and I was freaking out. I literally didn't know fucking what to do. I was running around like a chicken with their head cut off, waiting for the ambulance. They got lost. I'm out there in the road running them down. Oh god, it was terrible. Terrible. I did not know what to do. And finally the ambulance gets there, and I told them, everything that I told them all about the health conditions and everything, and they finally get him into the ambulance, and one of the EMTs, she said, yeah, she said his blood sugar is, I can't remember if it was too low or too high, but his blood sugar was like way out of where it was supposed to be. And I said, oh, is that what happened? And she said, yeah, probably. And so I said, all right, well, I'll follow you to the hospital. Got in the car and I'm following the ambulance, and I'm thinking, well, all right, it's just blood sugar, right? And they're gonna get him. We'll get him to the hospital, and they'll get that sorted out, and he's gonna be okay. And go to the hospital, and I'm waiting, and then um uh one of the doctors comes in, and he's like, he's had a massive stroke. And I was like, what? Like, I was in shock, right? And they were trying to tell me things, and I'm just like, it was kind of like an out of body experience. I didn't really understand what they were saying. I'm trying to take it all in. And they were running a lot of tests, and a couple hours later, the doctor comes in, and he's like, well, here's the thing. They're like, he's never going to be okay. This stroke is so massive that he is never going to be okay again. And they're like, you're going to have to make some decisions. And I'm like, what? I did not know. I had no idea, But they were, they were going to continue to care for him. And I said, well, I have to go get our son. So I went to pick up our son because, I felt like he needed to be there. Of course, Derek was he was 17 at the time. And I went and picked him up, and I don't know if that was the right thing to do or not. In retrospect, it may not have been. But came back to the hospital, and they wanted to do some more testing, right? They're like, well, we want to do some more testing. There's this test we can do, and maybe, they were like, well, maybe there's this thing we could do, that we could operate and do something with the blood clot on the brain, and they were kind of like, well, kind of gave me some hope there. And they said, can we transfer him to Mercy Medical? And I said, yeah, whatever you need to do, let's do it. And so I thought, gosh, it kind of gave me this glimmer of false hope, even though I knew better. Um, so they transferred him, and by this time I took our son home. I was taking him home, and I was going to come back. And on my way back, the doctor at Mercy called me, and they said, they're like, yeah, there is no way we could operate on him. There's no way he would survive it. And I pulled over and I just started to cry. And I just didn't know what to do, And so I go back up to the hospital, and I did not know what to do. I was just like in shock. And he was awake, but I don't know how much. I don't know how much he was comprehending, and the doctors were trying to talk to me about, oh, so awful, about pulling the plug on him right in front of him. And I said, no. I said, we need to go outside. I said, this is not the time or the place for this. I thought it was so insensitive, because he may have been understanding, right? And basically they're like, he's never going to be okay. The best he's ever going to be is if we transfer him to a long-term nursing facility, and he's got to have, around the clock care. And I know Mike would never want that. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, right? And sorry, my son's playing a game in the other room. But and so they were kind of pressuring me, like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, it really wasn't that hard of a decision, but I said, why don't we place him on comfort care, meaning that that they start giving him anti-anxiety medication and morphine to just to ease the symptoms. And when you start those medications, it'll usually accelerate someone's passing. So I had to make the call. I didn't want to. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. But I said, okay, because I knew that's what you would want, right? And like I said, I had our son at home, and he's got autism, and he just, he needed his mom to be at home with him. And I asked the doctors, I said, this is like at 5:00. I said, do you think, I said, is it okay for me to go home? I've got to tend to our son. And they're like, oh yeah, you're fine. You should be fine. Come back tomorrow, whatever. We'll let you know if anything happens. And so I was like, all right. And I went home, and I absolutely lost my shit. And my friend brought over, oh, this is so awful. She brought over like some gummies, like cannabis gummies that help you sleep. And like I finally just ended up taking one, because I was just absolutely distraught. And about midnight, the hospital called, and they said, look, they said, if you need to say goodbye or whatever, you probably should get here. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I am in no shape to drive. I told him, I said, I took something for sleep and I can't drive. And they're like, yeah, we understand. And then about 1:45 in the morning, the hospital called again and they said, "I'm so sorry, he's gone." So this is kind of wild. Apparently he passed, well, not apparently, he passed at 1:30 in the morning on January 13th. So 1313, like on a full blood moon. Um so that was wild. And I was in shock. I went into shock, like complete shock. I couldn't function. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Um, I literally thought I was gonna die. I did. I thought I was gonna die for like 10 days, and I think I was probably pretty close, because I wasn't taking care of myself and being in shock, and my body just was not in a good place. And yeah, for 10 whole days, it was like I completely left my body. I I had wild, crazy, paranormal shit going on. And I don't mean in a good way. It was really hard. And I don't know, like I said, after 10 days, something snapped and I just kind of like came back into my body. And um I have to be here for our son because our son needs us and needs me. My son needs me. And so checking out was definitely not an option. But so that's basically the story of what happened. Um, that's what happened. That's the dynamics of his passing. And uh, yeah, I think I'm still kind of in shock. Truth be told, that so I think from here now, going forward, I'll do some videos on, like I talked about the paranormal things that happen. So I'm gonna talk about that. And um so we'll deal with that next. But I wanted to get the story of how he died out there. I needed to do that. So I know it's heavy, but I really appreciate you listening and letting me, letting me document this. So, again, I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And hopefully, my next videos will be more uplifting because we're going to talk about all of the beautiful signs that he started giving me like immediately after he passed. And we're going to talk a lot about, um, how that twin flame relationship, how it changes, but it doesn't die after they cross over. So I'm hoping that's something positive and uplifting that will help some folks. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being a part of this really difficult journey.